Hey, Ange.
Hey Les, how's it going?
It's going. It's
Good.
going. Actually, it's not a complaint.
It's not.
I am rejoicing in the absence of a toothache.
Toothache. I went to the dentist today and I told her that you shared that with me, and she's like, yes, indeed, yes, indeed. Hey, everybody. We are back for another episode of Black Boomer Besties from Brooklyn. I'm Angela, and that's Leslie, my best friend of almost 50 years. You know who we are. We are two free-thinking, 60-something-year-old Black women. And we go deep in conversations, and we like to share joy, and we like to share new perspectives. And these conversations come out of just stuff that Les and I talk about on the regular, right?
Like in the car, driving to work.
Les, it's that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Here's what happened the other day. The other day, Leslie went to two events. I think they were either on the same weekend they were on the same weekend.
Same weekend, Saturday and Sunday.
And she noticed that she was one of, or the only Black person in the room of hundreds of people. And so we started talking about that, of being the only in these rooms, being in predominantly white spaces. And so she had some opinions, I had some opinions, and we were like, no, stop talking about it. We're going to record. So we're going to bring it to you fresh. We're bringing it to you fresh.
But before we go, I bring it to you fresh. I have an ask, as I always do. I'd like you to press like and subscribe. I think you really want to do that because we bring fresh perspectives and good conversations to you. If you hit notifications, then you'll always know when we drop new content. So take a second, press like, subscribe, ring the notification bell. I appreciate you. I heart you.
Oh, Lord. Did it happen? No.
It didn't happen. I heart you.
It's only when you're telling me that works.
Yes.
Okay. So go ahead and tell the people what happened.
So last Saturday, I joined a bunch of friends from my high school because one of them is in a band, a popular band that plays all around the city and other places. So I had the opportunity to go listen to his band in Staten Island. I live in New Jersey. So I went to turned out it was a sports bar with a stage and what have you, packed place. So I got there in the evening, and what was a little odd was that when I walked in, it's a sports bar, right? And someone said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "No, I'm meeting a bunch of friends here." And he said, "So, do you see them?" And I looked around, and then I saw them, and I sat down. So as the evening went on, I kind of looked around, and I would say there were a couple hundred people in the bar, some at the bar, some sitting at tables listening to the band and drinking and whatever. And I said, you know what? I am the only melanated person in this building. I said, it was a revelation. I said, I'm the only Black person in this place. Now, I live in the Northeast. I'm not in Iowa or someplace where there are fewer populations or percentages of Black folks. So I thought, here I am in New York City on a Saturday night in a bar and the only person. Okay, tuck that away. I had a great time. The band was great, and it was lovely getting together with my friends and all of that. Okay. The next day, I went to a fundraiser for a close friend's social service organization. This was in New Jersey, and it was very well attended. There were well over 300 people, probably about, I'd say 330 people with headliner comedians and whatever. It was a great event. I looked around, and again, when I thought I was the only Black person in the entire place, I actually saw one other African-American woman. So there were two of us out of 300 and plus people. And it got me to thinking, I said, Ange, you know, I don't often think of it like that, but we are a very segregated country. And I said, I wonder if people really understand not only the fact that that is the case, but rather what are the ramifications of such racial separation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also said that while I have many friends who are white, and people, not just work acquaintances, because that's usually where people find know people of the other race, but I have very close friends, people that I love, actually, who are white. And I said, I wonder if I'm their only Black friend.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And she also said, well, it's really the same thing on both sides. And I said,
oh, that is what I said. I said, you know, but if you think about it, in our spaces also, they're usually only Black people and only white. So it's the same on both sides.
Yeah. And I
heard the car screech. You're like, Les.
One of the reasons why I hit the brakes on that is because we often say things like that and then we keep going and we don't investigate. Is that really true? If it's true, why is it true? Are the whys the same? Right? We just kind of are okay with saying that, moving on, thinking about a few examples, move on. And those are the things that I like to dig at.
Yeah,
those are the things that I like to, you know, it's like, really, because those are the things and ways of thinking that happen in your life that you don't spend time thinking about. It's just like, oh, that's the way it is. Mm-hmm. And it's like, is it really?
Is that a false equivalence?
Does it really have to? Right. And why is it so? And So it was that, because it was one of those things.
I had to have this conversation that I hadn't anticipated. But then I stopped. I said, you know what? This seems like a podcast episode. So let's stop talking about it.
It's funny because it just hit on so many things. I thought about when I was at Penn, that year this is the University of Pennsylvania. It was the year that I enrolled, that was 1980. Of the, I think, 8,000 people in the undergraduate class that year, there were 400 Black people.
Oh.
And I remembered...
So that's 5%.
Yeah, a small number.
Okay.
And it's a huge university. So,
sure.
And I remember going to an on-campus event. I don't remember what was going on or whatever. And I heard someone who was white talk about the fact that the black students self-segregate in the lunchroom. Like, we only sit with other Black people in the lunchroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was really odd because...
Even back then at 18 years old,
even back then,
you did what you did with me.
I've always been that way. And I thought it was odd because, something like that, and on the surface, that may seem true, but when you think about it, why? if this is a kind of an observable fact, then why is it so? There were so few of us, right? One thing is that there were so few of us. For us to find some sense of normalcy and belonging and some commonality in this huge university, is that wrong? Should that be looked? And the person who said this saw this as a negative. By the way, let me just say that, right?
It was a critical thing.
It was yes, it was a critical comment, right?
Who was she eating lunch with?
I don't know, because this wasn't at the lunch. This was some conversation. It was the group setting and someone stood up and said this, right?
Okay.
So that was one thing, right? I mean, in this black university undergrad, you have so few people. I know in my school, I went to the engineering school, there were 5 black engineering students.
Wow.
In our year, right? And we were not in the same. I did mechanical, there was civil and whatever, biomedical and all of that. Anyway, there were 5 of us. So the one thing is that. Another thing is that it's so easy to see. Like, you wouldn't be able to look in a room and say, oh, why are all those people from Iowa sitting together? Because they happen to be white and they're self-segregating because it's only people, right?
Yeah.
So being something that is observable, being a color or whatever, or gender that is observable, you can say something like that and never have to self-reflect. You never get to self-reflect, because you can say, look at what they're doing, right? And the other thing that I thought of is kind of like what you said. Who were they sitting with? And was it our responsibility to go and find them? Was it our responsibility to kind of, hey, we shouldn't be sitting together here? Could it just be a group of friends? And did you scrutinize any other groups there to say, oh, how come they're only sitting with that?
It
was a group of friends.
The Christians sitting together.
Right. It was a group of friends sitting together. Right. And so it became this thing that, and as I remember, it was kind of this thing around, ways of creating community on campus and so on. It was like a dig. And so anyway, that kind of fired in my brain, because I remember that as being so because this is me coming from Brooklyn, but not only coming from Brooklyn being very, very diverse. Coming from a high school, Brooklyn Tech, that was very diverse. And I never really saw it as, oh, look at you guys doing this, that is weird. So anyway, in our days in Brooklyn Tech, we were eating lunch with everybody. It was whether you were the football team or on the track team or on the swim team.
Group
or in AP Calc.
It's true. The science head sat over here. Right. The people who used to sit in the center. It was not. Wow.
Yeah. So I just really wanted to kind of noodle at that a little bit. This idea about whether there is equivalence, even if you can say, you are you only have one white friend. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that in America, we are a minority, right? We are a global majority, but in America, we are a minority group. And so we live and just think of it as circles. There's a big circle of white. There's a smaller circle of Black people, African descended people. We swim in the white water.
Exactly. And how can we not be touched by the water we swim in?
We just are. And they don't have to come into our world.
Right.
But we are always in their world.
Yeah.
We're always in their world, right? There are very few places that we can go because it's on TV. It's the movie choices that we have. It's anytime it's like 3 Black movies. Oh, everything is equal. Really?
Why
Why
the Oscars so black?
Right. Black people.
Too many black
people have money. Look at these movie stars. Okay, there are 10 of them. It's like what?
Yeah.
Black people don't struggle.
That reminds me of the conversation that I brought up also, as a result of this. I said, now, I think that if more white people had intimacies with Black people, their Black friends, they would have this whole new idea about who we are, what we stand for, and not just but you're one of the good ones.
Right.
Remember,
that idea.
I had a colleague who said to me, he and I felt free enough to speak about issues of race and culture and religion and things like that. And I said something about being a Black woman in addition to being a Black woman physician, in addition to being a Black woman physician, anesthesiologist, etc. And he said, oh, but I don't see you as Black. Oh, I don't see you as Black. And I'm like, really? So then you don't see me.
Yeah.
Because how could you say that you, not in his case, but in other cases with my friends, how could you say you love me if you don't see me? And I think in general, when others stand to characterize people that they don't really know, that's why so many get it wrong.
That's right. Exactly.
That's why so many get it wrong. Because if this person does not see me as a Black woman physician, then he has no idea what it took for me to become and who I had to become to become a Black woman physician.
Right.
And then the role perhaps that I live in my household, in my family, in my community, and how that might differ from his role in his community.
Right.
And all the things.
Yeah, all the things. It's so interesting because we were talking about the fact that we are likely the only Black friend that some of our white friends have. Right? And a long time ago, we had a conversation about the idea of a single story, right? And so, you see a group of people through a single lens, right? Whatever. You see people who live in the country or in Iowa or whatever. You see people through this single lens. And so whenever you only have one, you tend to see just that person becomes the definition of that group of people.
Sure.
Right? And that person's opinions become the whole group's opinions.
And then that's, too, on that one person, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And guess what? They get things wrong. I let me see if I want to talk about this. I do talk about this.
Yeah, I'm laughing already. I haven't heard the story.
I have a friend who has a friend who is white, and they had an experience at taking their adopted daughter who is Black to get their hair braided, right? And they did not have a good experience. It was painful. The process itself was painful. There was tears. And my friend, I think, misinterpreted what happened, right? She misinterpreted. She interpreted it and told her white friend it might have been because the child's mother was white and they had some animosity towards the child because the child is white, right? I mean, the child is black and then the parent is white. My point of view, this other black person was
who is used to getting their hair done on a regular,
who is in the hair industry.
But we grew up with getting our hair done, being very painful. I remember having to sleep in those doggone pink rollers.
Exactly.
And every morning I woke up with my head indented and headaches. And
pink
then
rollers,
we all have the experience of the hot combs and the burns and the this, and getting your hair braided and it's too tight and you're like...
People telling you your hair's too hard and that's why they have to pull so hard. People telling you, hitting you with a comb because you moved when they're trying to get a straight part. Hair, in black culture, hair is pain. Hair is a pain. Getting your hair done, the culture of hair has a pain element. And so I might have explained something very differently to this white friend if she had me as her friend also.
If she had a bestie like I have a bestie.
And she has this perspective now, I would think, which is unfortunate, right? Because she might have left with this perspective that this is what happens and this is why. And for me, because hair culture is such a part of being a black woman, I always wonder, that's why it came to me, and this happened a couple years ago, that's why it came to me right now, is I always wonder to what extent that black child has been negatively affected because this kind of single or this person, your black person to go to, your black person to go to, the one, might have given you that impression. And of course, she knows, she speaks of the black experience. That might have been a very kind of detrimental thing in that experience. So,
or she could have been correct in her assessment
of that particular time.
If you have no other things to measure it by,
right? Exactly.
If you don't know anybody, if you just have that one black friend, didn't Charlie Brown have that one black friend? But when you only have the one,
at least he wasn't
friend,
the dirty one,
or Stymie. Wasn't Stymie the black
Leslie,
guy in the Little
how old are you?
I know. My gosh. I saw on TV. Wasn't Daffy Duck black?
No. Leslie, stop.
No. So what I'm saying is...
You can't help yourself.
No, I can't help myself. I can't. But what I'm saying is, it comes back to what that episode and what we talk about in terms of diversifying your community and your experiences.
Right.
And I know that diversity is a bad word these days because some crazy people made it a bad word. But we only stand to benefit when we have the ability to get other perspectives and not just our own narrow focus.
Right.
You know,
right.
And I just remember when I was at the function with the large number of people, the fundraiser, a lady was behind me and she says, oh, how are you affiliated here? And I said, oh, I'm good friends with my good friend and colleague, such and such. He's on the board here. And she's like, oh, okay. And what do you do?
Clean up the place.
And I said, And I said, oh, no, I don't do anything. I'm just a guest here. And she says, no, what do you do for work?
Mm-hmm.
And she says, and I said, why do you ask? And she says, oh, because you mentioned that he was your colleague. And I said, oh, okay, we're both physicians and, whatever. But,
and you could have been whatever. You could have been in the mailroom, or you could have been, I don't know. That stuff makes me really like.
Not, I was going to say, I could have been in the mailroom, but not at that price point of the ticket. Those weren't it wasn't a room full of mailroom employees.
They wouldn't have spent their money that way.
But anyway, it just makes me think, and I live in the Northeast, and I'm in New Jersey, I'm in New York, I grew up in New York and whatever. We are such a segregated population, self-segregating. Most of our churches, Sunday morning, they've always said, that's the most segregated time of day, Sunday mornings, when people go to their church and people go to theirs. Although I'm a member of a church that's very diverse, and
I was, but no more.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that people, it's their loss. It's their loss.
I think it is, and I think that
and it can become ours, but I think it's their loss.
Okay, so I have a podcast episode that I've had in a in my browser on my phone. Don't judge me, but I have maybe 180 something windows in my phone. Do not judge me. And this podcast episode, it's an unbeing podcast episode. It's probably in the 10th position on my phone, and I keep it because I've shared it with many people. I've shared it with one of my white friends actually, and I sometimes we've been a lot distant. I usually hear from her and I don't. And I've noticed some things, I've reached out a few times, and I really do need to see if she's okay.
And
but anyway,
it's about that episode.
And
lose my number.
But I do. But I do want to mention it here because I sent it to you because when you told me that this happened, I was like, Les, you gotta listen to this and see how you feel about this episode. It's on Being with Krista Tippett. You may be familiar with that one. And the episode, the original air date was July 9th of 2020. I've had it for a while. And the name of it is Towards a Framework for Repair. And it was, the two guests were Robin DiAngelo and Rizma Manikim. And they basically talk about ways that what is in America around race, how can that be repaired? How can that be fixed? And if you don't know, Robin DiAngelo is the white woman. She's the one that coined the term white fragility. It was her book of that name, that idea of, and this is me putting my understanding of it, is the idea that how this issue makes white people feel should the fact that white people are uncomfortable having these types of conversations and talking about race without us being in it, saying, oh, this is what race is. I'm like, you white people, y'all created this. You don't need us to figure it out. And you don't need us to always kind of put ourselves in a position of deep vulnerability, deep harm, deep fear and all of that,
and
by coming to us
and
to say, oh, tell us what we're doing wrong. And so they had a really, really interesting conversation. And the part that I really wanted Leslie to listen to, the whole episode is really fascinating. But one of the things that Resma Manikim talked about, and I really have tried to do it since I learned about this, how we have to, as Black people, get comfortable with leaving our Black friends, loved ones, our white friends and loved ones in the place of discomfort before kind of running and saying, oh, I didn't, or avoiding conversations because we don't want them to feel bad. It is that feeling bad, it is that discomfort that change happens in that place. And if we're so quick to want to kind of
soothe it,
we
and
don't want them
pacify it.
Pacify, I'm wondering if that's kind of what was showing up for my friend who's like, oh, don't feel, it's not you, it's them, or I'm not going to tell you this. A friend gave me a book once, and it was a book about a young Black man being killed by police and the fallout from that. And, it became a movie, and I avoided the movie on purpose because that could be my son's. There are certain things for some people, it's entertainment. For other people, like me,
it's visceral.
As a mother of black
it's
sons,
visceral.
It's like, I don't want to see that on the screen. I don't. And so she gave me this book as a way of acknowledging that I'm listening. This is a story that that really I took the time to listen to this thing. But for me, I had to let her know that her giving me that as a, hey, like when your cat or dog brings you a rodent, like, hey, look what
look what I got.
It's like, look what I brought you. And I did, because we're really close. I told her that I couldn't even open the book.
Wow.
I couldn't even open the book because it created so much angst and
sure,
and feelings of
Did she understand that? Do you believe that your reaction?
I think she probably did, but I think also what might have happened, and they talk about this, Robin DiAngelo and Risma talked about the fact that when you feel like there's nothing you can do, I can never get this right.
Yeah, so then you just shrink and you say
back.
Nothing.
I'll do the best I can, nothing. Or I do nothing, right? And that's how it perpetuates. Yeah,
that reminds me of during one of the recent political campaigns, and when I voiced from my heart that I was afraid of this person being put into high office. And my white friend said, like, how ridiculous. What do you have to fear? And I literally had to go deep and explain, and just off the top of my head, I really listed some of those reasons why I was viscerally afraid in my heart and in my body. And one, I don't think they understood it. And maybe they did, but it might have been so painful for them that they really either didn't mention it to me anymore or really they downplayed it.
Yeah.
And I walked away from that, and I've mentioned it a few times because I still feel it. How could you love me and downplay my fears and my feelings?
Yeah.
If you tell me you're afraid of heights, whether or not that's my personal fear, if I love you, I have to understand, and I'm not going to expose you to things that make you so afraid or try to protect you. I'll try to protect you from it. If I care about you. Otherwise, let's go to the top of the Empire State Building. Come on. It's nothing. Come on.
And walk on the glass. Come on. It's nothing. You're being silly.
It's
That's
a
not
level
real.
of sensitivity, I think, that one, the fact that we can't have these discussions and they turn into what people say, I don't want to have an argument, or you're not supposed to talk about that. You're not supposed to. That's why we've been talking about it, or two separate sides have been talking about it. Some people more than others have been talking about it, but separately for hundreds of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now we're not allowed to talk about it because it's being erased from websites. It's being closed from
research,
history.
everything.
You can't read it. The books are being taken away because
museums are being whitewashed. Yeah. It's real, guys. It's real. And
it's that level of discomfort. And it is said, we don't want people to feel uncomfortable about it. And hence, no one will hear it.
Yeah.
No one is allowed to talk about it in good company.
Yet that discomfort and pain is the greatest agent of change.
It's the only time
it's the greatest agent of change.
Exercise that muscle. You know how painful exercise is the first couple of weeks when you want to stop,
you get
right?
sore. Yeah.
But then after that, the muscles get used to it,
right?
And
you kind of like how you
that
look.
conversation without that nauseous feeling in your stomach.
Yeah, and this idea that it is your discomfort is paramount. Someone else's discomfort, someone else's pain, someone else's loss, someone else's, tragedy is not as important as you being uncomfortable talking about it.
Uncomfortable.
Because you're the center of the universe.
So often, my issues are life and death.
Yeah.
I mean, I can name names, I can give stories and this and that. I mean, I grew up where my parent had to give me the talk, and I had to give my Black sons and nephews the talk.
Or then when you were talking about your friend in the hospital.
Yeah.
Right? And what could have happened to her if you weren't there, and how they expected her to die. That was what they expected, because that's what happens. Black people. Yeah,
Brooklyn.
They get these ailments and they die, and it's not a big thing. It's not anything that we scramble to avoid. It's just what happens.
And who could understand that experience and the fear that I had visiting her in the hospital without my explaining that to them, if that's not their life?
Right.
They go to hospitals to get healed.
Exactly.
They go to hospitals and the doctor takes care of them.
Right.
And I've noticed it's, it's the same type of thing when I did my medical missionary work around the world, where hospitals, it's not the same as traditional hospitals here in the States. People were afraid to go to hospitals because that's where people went to die. And here we are, where this hospital was mimicking third world, what we call third world hospitals and mindsets. People in this particular hospital, I suppose, is where someone with her pathology went to die, And that wasn't very unusual. Well, in my world, not on my watch.
Yeah. So anyway.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's like, what's the takeaway? The takeaway that I would say, and then you can go, Les, is like, be curious about those things that we say, and those things that we believe are so just because it's so. It's easy to kind of move on. Yeah, that is. And then you move on. It's like, is that really so? Is that really so? I got to tell you one quick thing, right? Like I was in a meeting when I was in corporate, and someone who was Black, who was in HR, said, well, managers hire people who look like them. And I'm like, really? Black managers don't. I mean, and I say that because Black managers have to think, if I hire this person who looks like me, they're going to think I only hired her because she's Black, or
And then we get into this whole thing in our head this.
And so they don't. They are more likely to say,
they have to show that they are more fair and
inclusive. It doesn't. It's like, that's not really. What? And so, always kind of those things that just, this is so because it's so, or this is so because it's so in the white world. You always have to think about that twice, thrice, because it's typically not so, or the reasons that it's so are very different. And so just kind of grouping them the same is not really valid. That's my long takeaway.
And I'll give you an example also that I just thought about in medicine, because Black physicians are so few in number, we often, when we encounter white patients, we may have to overperform. Or over-explain.
Wow.
Or it's almost as though you're expected to show your credentials and show, why are you here, whatever, and of course, many times I've been, mistaken, oh, nurse, oh, this, can you get the doctor, that type of thing.
Right.
But it's always there. And my colleague who said he doesn't see me as Black, well, then how could he understand why I'm interacting with this patient in the way that I am?
Yes. Right. Or why his patient may see you differently or may not give you the same level of respect as they give him. Yeah.
Or why there's less tolerance, in my world for certain things than in other people's. I mean, if we can go on and on, how much time we got? How much time we got?
You're the timekeeper.
But anyway, no, we're here. Just something to think about. And I thought I found it very interesting. Did you guys find this interesting?
I hope so.
Give us some comments. Let us know.
Let's hear from you.
Yeah.
Let's hear from you. You're always going to get food for thought here at the Black Boomer Besties from Brooklyn.
There you go.
Brooklyn.
All right. Have a good night.
Bye, guys.